Welcome to Arctic Live. I'm Tim Reeves, your host today with the U.S. Army Engineer Research and Development Center, and it is a very special Arctic Live because of our guest, Lieutenant General Scott Spellman, the 55th Chief of Engineers and Commanding General of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. General Spellman has ignited a renewed focus and interest in the power of research and development within USACE, emphasizing the impact R&D can have in discovering, developing, and delivering engineering solutions for our nation. During his tenure as chief, USACE leaders have unveiled a new R&D strategy, outlined the organization's top 10 research priorities, and provided examples of how USACE's world-class research is producing real-world results. Today, we welcome General Spellman to Arctic Live, one of the many products created to help tell that R&D story. Sir, welcome to Arctic Live. Glad we can get you.
Hey, Tim, first of all, hopefully you can hear me okay.
Absolutely.
And I just want to say thanks to you and Debbie and the entire team down there in Vicksburg for getting me a spot on the show. Been the Chief of Engineers now for 2.5 years. And for my entire time in command, I've been fighting Dr. Pittman to get a spot on this program. And you got me the noon primetime slot. Really appreciate that and looking forward to the conversation today.
Well, sir, listen, it's a fight worth fighting. I'm glad you finally won. So we'll jump into the questions right away and go from there. Soon after becoming chief, you championed an increased focus on USACE R&D and elevating that story. Why did you believe that was such an important initiative?
Yeah, Tim, I think it goes back to my early experience in the Corps of Engineers, my 3 years in Northwest Division, where I saw the value and the benefit and the application of research and development out in the field. And that experience was certainly reinforced in my 2 years as the DCG for Civil and Emergency Operations. So I wanted to bring that power to my current role as the Chief of Engineers. And I tell people, the number one challenge, the number one opportunity the Corps has today is this massive and historic workload that's in front of us, right? It's above $90 billion. And I tell people with this massive program, we have to be humble. I mean, if you look at the challenges that the nation is facing today, we don't always have good construction solutions engineer solutions to our nation's toughest challenges. And just think about some of the things we're seeing. Certainly drought, right, and wildfires. The record snowpack, right, as we speak, out in California. We have this massive Category 5 storm heading into Guam this evening. Changing precipitation patterns, sea level rise, harmful algal blooms, right, the list goes on. And even just modernizing our water control infrastructure that was largely built back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and bringing that infrastructure up to date with today's environmental laws, whether it's the Clean Water Act or Endangered Species Act, National Environmental Protection Act, or many, many others. And to do that, I have just been of the firm belief that we not only need to talk about R&D, but we need to invest in it, right? And as you said, start a bold new era of USACE research and development that helps us get after these very, very sticky problems that we have across the country. And that's what I've tried to bring with the great team down there at Vicksburg, and certainly with all of the field and all of our commanders out there in the districts and our regional commands.
Well, great. Now, throughout that process, which has, like you said, for a number of years now, what have you learned about the R&D, the processes, the people, the capabilities?
Yeah, well, certainly Dr. Pittman will tell you, I had to get an education on my R&D vocabulary and, learned on TRLs and basic research and advanced research. And in helping us put that in our best plain English to the people that resource us, right, that do the budgeting, and certainly with our commanders out in the field. The process, I thought the budgeting process was similar to what my experience was in civil works. We put in a justification sheet. We tell the administration, we tell Congress why we want to pursue a certain project, a certain research avenue. That wasn't too foreign to me. But certainly then when you start to dive into the capabilities in our labs, not just the capabilities, but the incredibly talented civilians and research scientists that we have, that has just made all of the difference. And I just think we are incredibly blessed in this organization to have that mix, right, of our labs, certainly of our people, and in the right process to get after some of these challenges. And I would tell you, I'm doubly blessed because Secretary Connor is just as strong, if not stronger, advocate for the power of research and development, particularly in our civil works program, and that has been a great benefit to us as well.
So I'm among one of the fortunate ones, I guess, each month to sit in on the R&D briefings that you have with some of the researchers here, and I'm a fly on the wall. I don't ever get to say anything. But how much do you enjoy those briefings and learning about a particular project, particular research project?
No, Tim, I love those briefings. Frankly, it's my favorite time of the month when you just listen to the energy behind what our folks are doing and the passion that they have for their work in one of our many labs. And to me, it's all about connecting the dots, right? Connecting the research that they're doing in our laboratory to challenges and solutions that we need out in the field. And all too often, I think in the past, this has happened by accident. And I like to tell the story of Lieutenant Colonel Drew Johantes, our great commander down in the Charleston district. And a few months ago, Drew was out doing just an orientation visit out at the Construction Engineering Research Lab in Champaign. And while he's on that tour, he meets Dr. Rebecca Wilson. And Rebecca takes him back to the paint lab and shows her some of the research that she's doing on coatings for a gate, a challenge that we're having, I believe it was up at the Sioux Locks. And Drew looks at that and says, well, I'm having the same challenge with a coating on a gate that I have down in Charleston district. And then those two meet, and then we're off and running on a solution. So that completely happened by accident. And so the benefit of having these monthly briefings with Dr. Pittman, a research scientist, is I get a chance to take a look at those and say, okay, what is the field wrestling with right now? And let's bring these briefings into our executive governance meetings and have our research scientists talk to all of the district commanders, all of the MSC commanders. And if you've ever seen that experience, our commanders and our deputies run up to those scientists afterward to talk about problems that they're experiencing within their district footprints and get after better solutions. So again, long answer, but that's really, to me, it's all about just getting after the dots, connecting the dots.
Well, you talk about one of those briefings. I think one of the researchers who you had a chance to brief with was Samantha Looker of the GSL, who had the sand boil filter kit, and you were able to take a selfie with that one. I think that was a good photo to have from her briefing at the EGM.
And that's right. And we were able to link Samantha up with all of our commanders on the lower Mississippi, where this is an acute challenge, a new technology, and certainly one that we want to employ as we get ready to roll into a flood season this year.
Now, before I forget, we're inviting the entire audience to submit questions for General Spellman, and you can do that through LinkedIn and YouTube through the chat area. So please go ahead and put your questions in, and we'll try to get to those at near the end of the broadcast. Going back to those briefings, sir, those discussions with researchers and learning about those projects, do you think that we're on the right path, that we're in the right direction of solving many of those challenging issues?
Oh, we are absolutely on the right path. Now, look, there's always more work to do. And it's not, Tim, it's not just internal work within the Corps. So everything I've been focused on here so far with our discussion, work we're doing internally to connect the dots. But I talk a lot about partnering. And partnering, to me, in research and development is just as important, whether it's with other federal agencies, state agencies, academia, which we do very, very well. And there's really, in my view, no real progress in research and development without those strong partnerships as well. But absolutely, I believe we are on the right path.
It was announced in February the president's FY24 budget called for a historic investment in R&D, specifically in civil works. What will this landmark investment mean, and what are some specific challenges this investment will help address?
Well, no, absolutely. And before I answer that, Tim, I just want to thank the field, the regions and the districts who put forth some pretty good initiatives that they would like to pursue to get after some sticky challenges that they have out in their regions. And I also want to thank Mr. Connor, who is a great partner in this, in talking of the value and selling these proposals to the administration. For the listeners that are not aware, in the president's FY24 budget, it has essentially quadrupled the research and development that we have seen in the Corps since about 1983. So really heavy investment. So just a few examples of the things that we want to pursue and get more traction on. I always talk about forecast-informed reservoir operations, or FIRO, a great tool that we have put to work at a place called Lake Mendocino out in California, one of our core projects. And for those not familiar with FIRO, it allows us to make water. The technology is so good; it allows us to make water management decisions, whether we're going to hold more water behind a dam before a storm or release it in advance of a storm. We can make that decision before that atmospheric river ever hits the coast, right? And that's just unheard of elsewhere in the country, because we generally make water management decisions after the precipitation has already hit the ground. And unfortunately, sometimes that's just too late. So incredible technology, and very fortunate that we want to advance that to other projects. We have 31 dams out in California. California just had a number of atmospheric rivers hit it, and I don't think we can do this work fast enough. So another pilot going on at Prado. We're taking another one up at Howard Hanson Dam in the state of Washington. And this investment in the president's budget, it's going to allow us to address additional projects over time for this particular program. Engineering with nature and beneficial use of dredge material. Again, I think this is going to give us opportunities to invest in research that will allow us to increase the application of natural and nature-based features along with our structural solutions, whether it's coastal storm risk management or certainly inland flood risk management. Certainly a lot of work to do there on the research and development front. And I'll just hit one more, a topic that's generally reported much in Florida, but it's acute in other areas of the country as well, and that is harmful algal blooms, right? Significant water quality challenges around many of our lakes and reservoirs. And this is something that is going to better enable us to make flood risk management decisions, but it also improves water quality and recreation opportunities and a number of other functions that we perform on these large bodies of water. But those are three areas. There are a number of others, but those are the ones we're really excited about because we feel we've got a real opportunity here to make some meaningful progress.
Well, as part of that, and that made me remember something for later today, we have another live broadcast on our LinkedIn and YouTube platforms about the Civil Works R&D tech challenges and commercial solutions discussions. That'll be at 2 o'clock Central, and that with our Civil Works R&D team, Dr. Mosier, and our ERDC Works partners will be having that conversation at 2 o'clock. And we know there's a huge group that's already registered for that event. And so we hope if you have time to join it. If not, we hope that the audience will as well. So another USAID's focus area is incorporating what you just mentioned a minute ago, nature-based features and solutions in our projects. How is the growth and expertise within USAID's Engineering with Nature initiative, a program born out of ERDC research, helping in those areas?
Yeah, Tim, I think, first of all, I think we're making a lot of meaningful progress. And I have three brief examples I'll just walk everyone through. But I think the first one is just combating the myth in our own ranks within the Corps that we are asking districts and our project delivery teams to make an either-or decision, whether it's you're going to come up with a structural solution for this problem set, or it's going to be a natural nature-based feature. And that's not what we're talking about at all. In my view, these two methods complement each other. So just a couple of examples. Many of our listeners are familiar with the system that we put around the city of New Orleans following Hurricane Katrina back in 2006, and it's the Hurricane and Storm Damage Risk Reduction System, or HSDRS. And that was designed for a 100-year event, 1% chance of a particular storm that would exceed the capabilities of that system, whether we're talking the flood walls, the levees, or the pump systems that we put inside the city. A number of years later, Hurricane Ida in 2021 was that 1% event. And if you look how the system performed as it was designed, right? The compacted dirt, the steel, certainly the concrete features and the pumps that I mentioned, that performed as it was designed. But I would argue one of the reasons that it performed so well was the natural features that the state of Louisiana had invested in addition to the concrete and steel and compacted earth. And that is, I'm talking about their Coastal Barrier Island program and the marsh restoration program. Those features took a lot of energy out of that storm before that wind ever made it to the gates of New Orleans. So I just think that's a prime example of structural solutions being complemented by natural and nature-based features. Another one would be down in the Everglades, and I'm speaking here of the Kissimmee River restoration and the Herbert Hoover Dike rehabilitation. Both projects generally occurred during the same time frame. So if you think of the Herbert Hoover Dike, it had a lot of seepage problems, and our teams went in, Chief's report published, and we received the funding to go in and install an 80-foot cutoff wall around a large portion of that dike system, restoring its functionality. But concurrent with that, we also, just to the north, the main feeder to Lake Okeechobee is the Kissimmee River. And when we designed the Central and South Florida Flood Risk Management Project back in the 40s and 50s, we straightened out that channel. So that water flowed like a locomotive from south of Orlando into Lake Okeechobee and then out a series of canals to the ocean. And it worked very, very well for flood control. I don't think when we designed that system, initially, we accounted for, I don't think anyone ever imagined the water quality challenges that would emerge in South Central Florida. So as part of this, we went back in and we put the original curves, original bends back in the Kissimmee River, and we used a lot of restored natural plantings there. And so the curves in that river certainly attenuated the flow, took the energy out of the water before it made it into Okeechobee. And those natural plantings do wonders in removing the phosphorus and the nitrogen from the water column. And so the benefit, you've got the attenuated flows, you've got cleaner water now flowing into Lake Okeechobee, further mitigating the risk that we have from, as I mentioned earlier, harmful algal blooms. It makes it a bit easier for us to make water management decisions when we have to late in spring as we get into hurricane season. So there's two. I'll just mention another one real quick. It's levee 536, L536 in Atchison County, Missouri, on the Missouri River. And this sounds, when we built the federal and the private levees around the Missouri River back in the 50s and 60s, we put those levees largely right up on the riverbank, right? Because we wanted to maximize the amount of area that we had for agriculture. And we know that the Missouri River historically wants some room to roam, and it fights back on our levees all the time. And we have been advocating for a number of years, particularly following the 1993 flood on the Missouri and the Mississippi River, that we ought to go back in and actually set back some of these levees to be able to give that river some room to roam and take some of the pressure off the levee system. Well, I'm proud to report that the Omaha District was able to make this case to our great partners out there on the lower Missouri River. And we've had the first setback levee in this modernization program in Atchison County. And so in my humble way, what seems common sense to us now as compared to when we built these systems, we are actually going back and engineering this system with nature. And again, something as simple as a setback levee. Anyway, Tim, those are just some examples. I have many others. But again, I think the message I would like to leave with the team is we're not driving for an either-or decision. It's not just structural and it's not just engineering with nature. In many cases, we want them to complement each other.
And sir, thank you for that. And I'll remind the audience to submit the questions in the chat areas for General Spellman. I'm sure there's some good ones coming in. If not, I'll just make up a few as we go along. So we'll just go from there. And I know I have a ton of questions as well. But at ERDC and USACE, we're looking at ways to revolutionize decision making through increased use of AI and machine learning. Where do you see this developing technology helping USACE deliver projects on time?
Yeah, in fact, I had a great conversation with Dr. Pittman just this morning on use of artificial intelligence, and this was coming from industry on some ideas that they had to help us with flood prediction, and some good back and forth with industry just this morning on this topic. I think there's a lot of opportunity here, Tim, and a lot of areas that we can explore. So we have taken some initial looks at, can we make, today, for example, dredging on the Southwest Pass on the lower 33 miles of the Mississippi River. We have a lot of talented people that know our river systems incredibly well, and they, based on flows and precipitation, our people are very good at knowing when we think we're going to need additional dredge vessels down on the Southwest Pass to clean that channel. sometimes we hit that right on, and sometimes we're off by 3 weeks, or maybe 3.5 weeks. And you can imagine 3.5 weeks for a vessel, a large dredge vessel. There's only 19 of these in the hopper dredges in the U.S. inventory. 4 of them are ours. And if we miss that window by 3 weeks, boy, that's an opportunity lost to another port, another federal navigation channel that we need to be maintaining. Well, can we put some of this hydrologic data and precipitation data and sedimentation data into a machine and have the machine help us do some learning and narrow that window down so we're not off by 3 weeks or 3.5 weeks? Maybe we can get that down to days. Anyway, that's one idea. I know that we established the Dynamic, Immersive, and Virtual Environment, or DIVE, laboratory there at ERDC back in 2019. And that was really geared to help us look at augmented reality and virtual reality and how can we apply those technologies to our projects. And the one example I'd like to talk about here is I took a virtual tour of the new Sioux Lock up in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. I took a virtual tour with a set of goggles on, and the team was walking me through just absolutely fascinating technology. But what was even better was that we had allowed our contractors and our designers to take a walk through that new lock, and they were finding solutions for problems they had not envisioned, but just based off paper drawings, right? And so incredibly powerful, both in our design and early design and our construction efforts. And certainly, I just think there's more opportunities there. It's something that I think we want to pursue as well.
And actually, I'm working on an article now with Jeremy Herring here at the ITO Lab, who they had an event here with ERDC Works where they invited industry in for AI options for infrastructure maintenance. And so that work is ongoing and trying to delve into new areas all the time. So and we're actually right next to the Dive Lab in the studio here.
Tim, that's great. And it's incredibly powerful when you just having a different set of eyes on these very complicated projects, on the things that we're learning and the things that we can apply.
Well, back to the topic of elevating the story of R&D. You have initiated several tools to help better tell that R&D story. Do you see a shift in culture and mindset within USACE and beyond regarding the value of R&D and the adoption of innovative solutions?
Yes, Tim, I do. I think we have a great story to tell. I think we're making great progress in some corners of our enterprise, and certainly, as I mentioned, we can always do more. And I just tell this quick story. We just wrapped up a week ago our third quarter executive governance meeting up at a place called Fargo Moorhead up in North Dakota and in Minnesota. And we're just visiting the Great St. Paul District. And I wanted to take the team out there because they have a very complicated civil works project there that is being delivered safely. It's high quality construction, it's on time, and it's actually under budget. And so as we were making, the first day was a tour of the major facilities of that project. And I just had the luxury of hosting not only Secretary Connor, but North Dakota Senator Hoeven on that visit. And I just remember we're driving Senator Hoeven, and I'll just work west to east. We took him out to the massive water control structure called the diversion inlet structure. And then we took him out to the Interstate 29 raise, where we had to raise existing interstate up out of the floodplain. And then we went to the Wild Rice River control structure. And then over further east, we went to the Red River control structure. Massive structures, some of which are the largest engineering structures in the state of North Dakota. So Senator Hoeven was absolutely fascinated by this visit. And the question that he asked me and Mr. Connor, he goes, okay, this all makes sense to me now seeing it out in the field, but how did the Army Corps of Engineers on paper get the sizing of these structures correct, the sizing of the gates correct, and the placement of them? How did that all come together? And so very fortunate, we had some slides, and we went right back to research and development, and we talked to him about the incredible physical and numeric modeling efforts that went on years and months in advance of construction down there in our labs at Vicksburg. I would say he's absolutely sold, and Senator Hoeven can't wait to visit because he just sees a lot of power in this. And that was just another motivator for taking the team out there, was to show the power of ERDC in helping us deliver some of these very complicated solutions for the nation. So yeah, again, I think we have a great story to tell, and I look forward to advancing this effort even more in my remaining time as the chief.
I guess the follow-up to that is and self-serving to our team here is what can we do better or more of to help you in that mission?
Yeah, I think we're doing it, Tim. Obviously, I'd like to connect more dots, right? For the work that we're doing in the lab and to the problems that we're facing out in the field. So one of the initiatives that we have every year is we're going to have 15 new district commanders come in here this summer. And I like to get them all down to ERDC like within their first few months, just so they get a taste of the power of what the team and our research scientists provide down there. I want to continue our after action reviews. You know, after every EGM, I ask the commanders and everyone that attends, give me one up and one down, something you learned during the past week while you were here, and something that we could do better. I would tell you predominantly the things that people tell me that we need to sustain are these what we call the R&D connect the dots session, because our teams are absolutely learning from what others are experiencing across this very vast enterprise. And it's not just here in the United States, it's work that we're doing in 110 countries around the globe today. So those are the things that I want to continue to press on. And I appreciate everyone's support from our great ERDC enterprise as we go through this.
Sure thing. Well, we've already started getting some questions from the audience, and again, I will tell the audience to, as we do this, go ahead and submit, continue to submit some questions. We'll try to get those worked in the time we have remaining. So the first one is, sir, we talked about the Civil Works R&D event later this afternoon. Can you talk about the importance of partnerships for USACE to accomplish its mission? Yeah. I think Tim, I'll answer this one with an example where I think the partnerships are important. We had a chief's report that came to me several months ago. It had to deal with below ground water supply down in Florida with a technology called aquifer storage and recharge wells. And we have some incredible partners down in this corner of Florida, in the South Florida Water Management District, who have been dealing with ASR wells for some time. They really have. And they have in place a number of these structures, and they've learned from them. And they have shared with us many of their findings that where they've had challenges and where things have gone well. And now we want to take a swing at advancing that technology and that system even more. But my argument has been, look, let's partner closely with South Florida. They're very good at this. They've got a lot of experience. But before we step off on, in this chief's report, the next 55 wells that we are proposing, let's do a little bit more research and development and learn even more from what South Florida Water Management District's experience has been, and how can we get after some of the clogging and maybe better efficiency on recovery of water after we put the water down into the well. Are there things that we can do to prevent some of the harmful metals that are down there in the aquifers and prevent them from coming to the surface and dealing with some of the challenges that they had faced? Anyway, I just think that's one example where I would like to see us partner more. That's one. I think I mentioned beneficial use of dredge material earlier, and I think this is just another opportunity to partner. So if you go to the Port of Baltimore today or the state of Ohio, and some of the things that they are doing with beneficial use of dredge material, some really neat research and development initiatives that they're undertaking. And I would like to partner with them even more. As you know, I have a goal to flip my numbers. Of late, we are placing, I would say a year and a half ago, we were placing about 70% of our dredge material out in ocean disposal sites, and only 30% was going to beneficial use projects. I've set out a goal for the team. I'd like to flip those numbers. I'd like 70% of our dredge material to go to beneficial use and 30 to ocean disposal. But to do that, now we need some R&D effort behind it. It's much like the work that's ongoing in the Port of Baltimore and out in the state of Ohio. But again, just to emphasize the importance of partnerships. Absolutely. So the next question, sir, is USACE is in charge of construction on military installations, such as renovating and building smarter and more resilient installations. Can you discuss some R&D that is addressing these challenges, things such as energy and water systems, design, build plans, and so forth?
Yeah, so great question. Certainly one of the initiatives, one of the priorities for the current administration is how do we achieve greater energy savings, better energy efficiency in our not only our military construction projects, but work that we're doing with sustainment restoration, modernization, large O&M projects, and works that we're doing for the VA, certain or other partners across the country. So one of the challenges that we have today in getting after energy efficiency is these are really complicated systems that we're dealing with. The chillers and some of the air handling units that we are working with today out in the field, they are state of the art, and that's fabulous. The challenge is they're really difficult to maintain. So once we build a new barracks, once we build a new dining facility, and we put this state-of-the-art equipment in there to get after energy efficiency, we've got to give our partners in Installation Management Command and other partners out there something that they are trained and able to operate and maintain. And that's one of the significant challenges that we have today. So I would like to see some investment in research and development. Can we not only have the benefit of these modern systems that are incredibly energy efficient, but can we get them to a point where they're simple enough where our partners in other agencies can actually maintain them and keep them functioning for the soldiers and our great teams that occupy, work, and live in these structures.
All right. So how, I guess back to the energy question we just had, how are technologies and processes for desalination, offshore solar and wind, hydrogen, biofuels, and other renewables going to be prioritized, developed, and integrated into future solutions and applications?
So certainly on desalination and others, we have seen those recommendations in select communities across the nation, in particular where we're having some challenges with water supply. But you can imagine if you're familiar with desalination technology, great benefit on the topic of water supply, but it also produces a heavy brine, right? That has to get put back out into the water column, and that's been some of the challenges that we've had before. So going back to research and development, are there ways to mitigate some of those some of the outputs from desalination where they're not as harmful to the environment? Again, it's just another idea, and should Congress choose to invest in that technology, and I think that's just something else that we would want to jump on. Tim, I'm sorry, you mentioned a couple of other things there.
Yeah, there was a list of the examples, such as EV, biofuels, offshore solar and wind. Those are some of the other examples that were listed as well in that question.
Yeah, I know Bureau of Ocean Energy Management is doing a lot right now with offshore wind, and our role has really been one of a regulatory role, and certainly continuing to support that, particularly up in our New England district at the moment, is heavily involved in that technology as well.
All right. So you mentioned the storm that was approaching Guam, and hurricane season is approaching soon. And how does USACE prepare for the start of hurricane season each year? Right.
And so we, as we get into, first and foremost, we do a senior leader seminar with all of our core leaders, with the FEMA headquarters here in Washington, D.C., and then our regional leadership, district leadership, out with the respective FEMA regions out in the field. And that will occur next week. And we'll talk about lessons learned from last year and best practices moving forward. Ongoing, as we speak, Tim, there is a Army North tabletop exercise ongoing down at Joint Base San Antonio. So as you can imagine, the work that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers does under the National Response Framework in support of FEMA, we also have our Army and joint partners working side by side with us out in the field as they provide the Title X support to these communities. That might be high water vehicles, it could be helicopter lift, search and rescue, a number of things. So we are already saddled up down at Army North today with a number of leaders, both from our regions and the headquarters, going through that process. And then, of course, we had just last week, we had what we call our Are You Ready briefing to General Graham, where each of the regions walk through the flood risk that they foresee in their respective regions, whether it be coastal or whether it be riverine flooding, and to go through the mitigations that we have in place and the plans that we have and that we have to react. And I'll just end by saying I'm incredibly proud of the Army Corps of Engineers as we work through hurricane response each and every year. That's a bit more unpredictable for us. But we've got a good set of battle drills. We've got great leaders in the field, both military and civilian, that have a lot of experience in doing this. We'll never be able to go fast enough for the governors and the people that are impacted by these terrible storms. You're dealing with people that are having, those impacted people are having the worst day of their lives, right? And but we're doing everything we can to help get these communities back up on their feet as quickly as possible.
Well, I can attest, having grown up on the Alabama Gulf Coast, hurricane season is a rite of passage. It seems like each year you feel it, and,
right.
and you're always looking for November as fast as possible. Sometimes with those seasons. So the next question is: access to the tremendous amounts of data across USACE COPS is necessary for AI to work. How do we break down the stovepipes to share data across USACE COPS to prepare us for the future, for this future capability?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I absolutely agree. We have a lot of data that is captured in stovepipes. Let me just give you the example that I have wrestled with in my time as the chief. And so if you go down to our military programs and talk to the Program Integration Division, they capture 54 items of data on every one of our MILCON projects. And then if you walk to the other side of the hall into Civil Works, I think it's somewhere around 234 pieces of data on a Civil Works project. And that's just because we do the planning, the programming, and budgeting, whereas MILCON, we're really just doing the construction. And then if you look at environmental, it's something less than that, maybe 9 or 10 data points. And so the question that I asked, 2.5 years ago, okay, we're collecting all of this data. It's in these stovepipes. How many of them deal with quality? The quality of the work? Yeah, very, very few. Okay, how many of those data elements deal with safety? None of them. None of them. Safety comes up in a completely different channel. And then, so generally, the data that we're collecting deal with cost and schedule. Well, my goal, and I've established this definition of winning, following the General McConville, Chief Staff of the Army's guidance to me, was to define winning for the Army Corps of Engineers. And we said it's safely delivering quality projects on time within budget. Yet all of the data that we were collecting only got to a small piece of that. So I started a program, a new Commander's Critical Information Requirement called CCIR number 8, in an effort to break down some of those stovepipes so that commanders at the district level and the regional level, and certainly at my level, better understood how we are actually getting after winning with all of the data that we are collecting. Now, for artificial AI, we're going to have to take that to the next level, right? And I just mentioned an example earlier of dredging, and how do we capture our sedimentation, our precipitation data, our riverine data that we collect, and best put that into a machine that can help us make potentially help us make more accurate decisions. So it's a great question. It's certainly a work in progress, and my humble assessment is we have a lot of work to do on that front.
Sure thing. So the next question, sir, is could you please talk to any initiatives ERDC USACE is doing to support and or prepare COCOMs for potential future conflict areas such as Indo-PACOM area of operations?
Yeah, so I think this is a whole separate ERDC live session in itself, and it's all of the great work. All the R&D efforts that I've been talking about here this morning with you are really focused on our internal work, whether it's military construction or it's civil works. Entirely separate briefing on all the work that Dr. Pittman and our ERDC teammates are doing in support of Army modernization. So if you look at the Army's modernization priorities, whether it's extended long-range fires or future vertical lift, the next generation of our helicopter fleet, or precision targeting, it's absolutely amazing that ERDC is involved in one form or another in all of those modernization priorities for the Army. And I would tell you, many of those new systems, 34 of them in particular, will be rolled out to the field to our soldiers and units this year. And just proud to report that ERDC had a huge role in the development of these, and those systems are applicable in the Pacific just as they are in the Europe theater and everywhere else that our soldiers serve around the globe. But incredibly proud of all the work that ERDC has done and continues to do in support of Army modernization.
Sir, what are some innovative technologies you are seeing? You mentioned dredging earlier and the need to flip the number on beneficial use. What are some innovative technologies you are seeing in dredging, and why is it so important to the Corps?
Yeah, so I was out on one of our industry dredge vessels here within the past year, and the work that industry is doing, and we are as well, is just on environmental compliance. So think of some of the challenges that we have down in South Atlantic Division in Florida or Southeast Coast on dredging and avoiding takes of sea turtles, right? Just as one example. And so I remember the captain of this particular vessel pulled up the dredge arms, and he walked me through about 4 or 5 different technologies that they have down deep in the water on the head of this dredge, just to spur movement of sea turtles and to get them out of the path of the dredge as it does its work. And it was everything from acoustic, lights. There were physical, called them turtle ticklers, chains, if you will, that prodded the sea turtles to move. And then even on the deck of the vessel, they had a small medical team that, should they have a sea turtle injured, that they could do first aid with. And then there was a veterinarian hospital that we took them to if they needed more urgent care. So that's one part of it. So that's the physical piece down there on the dredge. And then just very proud of the work that South Atlantic Division has done in not necessarily in working with our resource agency partners, not necessarily tying our dredging operations to a fixed calendar window, but tie it to data when the sea turtles are locating in the way of the vessels or in the pathways of the waterways, or when they're not. And so just an incredibly innovative approach to, it seems common sense, but something we had not done for many years. And it's just data-informed decisions on how best to get after our mission.
Sir, I have to tell you that I encouraged my sons to watch today's broadcast, and they're doing so. I get home, I guarantee you the only thing they'll take away from this is turtle ticklers. I guarantee you that's the only thing they're gonna talk to me about when I get home. So.
And you should tell both your sons that they work very well.
I will. Sir, you're very well informed on current and future technologies. So if you could dream big, is there a futuristic technology or innovation you would love for USACE to have at its disposal?
Wow. So, what a great question. I think near term. So I talked to you earlier about forecast-informed reservoir operations and this technology that we are developing with other state and federal agencies, many partners, that allows us to make water management decisions well before an atmospheric river hits the west coast of the United States. We received authority in WRDA 2020 to see if we could take that technology, which is proving out very effective on the west coast, and take it to other parts of the country where we are seeing changes in precipitation patterns. So think of the upper Great Plains on the Missouri River, or think of Florida. Areas where in the United States we see not only increased rainfall events, but more volume of water falling during those events. And so you talk to Dr. Walmsley and Ty Walmsley, wow, what would it take to take a technology like that and bring it to the interior of the country, where we could prevent, say, or maybe perform better in a 2011 event on the upper Missouri, or a 2019 event on the lower Mississippi or the lower Missouri River. And the technologies we need are more on how do we best measure runoff from not mountain snowpack, but plain snowpack. And then how do we better measure and gather data on rain on snow events like we saw on the lower Missouri River in 2019. And if you could marry those two technologies along with what we have ongoing on the West Coast today, I think that, to me, that would be one of incredibly powerful tool for our water managers out in all of the districts that manage these very, very complicated waterways and are trying to do so now with some really changing climatic conditions. As I mentioned, more frequent rainfall events in some corners of the country, with more water falling during those events, and other areas of the country where we have low water. I think that would be an incredibly powerful tool, and one that I would put on my wish list.
There you go. And you mentioned this a minute ago, sir, but this was a particularly wet winter with high amounts of rain and snow. How is USACE preparing for these potential flood risks?
Yeah, I think that's, as I mentioned earlier, we had our Are We Ready? Are You Ready brief last week with each of the MSCs, and talk from, a high level where we were in managing what we know is coming our way. So I mentioned the mountain snowpack out in California. For our listeners that don't know, we're about 300% of normal in the Sierra Nevadas. And we recently completed the new spillway and the dam raise at a place called Isabella Dam. And it was not a moment too soon. We're going to use all of that space and more here as that snowmelt comes off the mountains in California. But again, I think it's the marriage of what we do in support of FEMA, what we do within our own authorities on our levees and projects, and then certainly working in communication with our many partners at the state, federal, and local level to make sure we all have the same sight picture on the threats that are out there and the best way to go about mitigating those threats in all of the communities that we serve.
Sir, due to climate change, how can we better communicate the need for R&D within the contingency operations field to OMB, Congress, and others to better prepare and respond to crisis events?
Yeah, so I think this is all about showing the science, right? And so when we do a Chiefs report, Tim, for example, we for a coastal project, we will generally pick one of 3 sea level rise curves. They have different names, but think low, medium, and high. And we will pick one of those curves to design that coastal project for, based on our best assessment at the time. And then I think the challenge for us then as engineers is we've got to do our best job in converting that very technical information into our best plain English when we take our reports forward to the folks that program dollars and approve projects of this nature to ensure that they understand the technical rigor that goes in behind these recommendations and why we're making the investment recommendations that we are. I just believe it's all in the translation. And I know it's something I work hard on every day, and certainly everyone up here on the 3rd floor of the GAO building does as well.
Next question, sir, is have you had any meetings or discussions with our centers of expertise outside of ERDC? And do you have a vision on how to coalesce and engage them in future R&D work?
Our centers of excellence, and again, another great point and a great question. And I think it's another opportunity and something that we need to take advantage of. And I've been talking about the drum I've been beating on R&D with the regions and the districts. And I think I've got to do more. We all have to do more on bringing in our centers of expertise into this conversation as well, and connecting the dots with them with challenges that they're seeing in their respective stovepipes. I think just a lot of opportunity on this front as well.
Sir, I know you were just recently back at West Point and had a chance to meet engineering students and such. How excited are you about the future of engineers, the future of the Corps of Engineers when you see and meet those cadets?
Yeah. Hey, Tim, one of the questions I often get as I'm traveling, hey, what's the best part, Spellman, of being the chief of engineers? And you can answer that question in a lot of ways. But the thing that always on the top of my mind is no matter what I'm doing, whether I'm here in the headquarters like I am this week, or I'm out in the field visiting a district, or up at West Point a couple weeks ago meeting with engineering students, I get to see, in this role, I get to see the future of the Army Corps of Engineers, and I get to see the future of the U.S. Army Engineer Regiment every day. Our future leaders, our civilian leaders, our military leaders, and our up-and-coming engineers, both on the military and civilian side. And I think that's the most gratifying part of this job for me. And to answer your question, I'm incredibly excited. To tell your listeners, I got to visit Projects Day for the civil engineering students out there, and a lot of innovative thought at a very early age for these young engineers, and they're going to be great teammates for us here in not too distant future.
Good deal. Sir, the next question from the audience is, Western states are facing many challenges in terms of water supply. How is USACE looking for innovative solutions to tackle this? And I know you mentioned FIRO earlier in the broadcast a couple of times, but what other steps are being taken to help the Western states tackle both, excess water in some areas and drought in other areas?
Yeah, so I mentioned FIRO, and just for the folks that are not tracking the data for Lake Mendocino, again, the technology has proven incredibly valuable, and it's allowed us to save somewhere between 15 and 20% of water that we otherwise would have sent downstream. So you can imagine when you're in drought, every drop of water counts, and saving 20% of a large reservoir, that's a lot of water. In addition to FIRO, and taking FIRO inland, and I mentioned earlier, I'd like to do for other projects, I think we have got to be more open, and I know Secretary Connor is a huge fan of this approach on things like reallocation studies. So where the data supports it, right? So we have 715 projects across this country that impound water, some large, some small. And much of those built for flood control, right? So we want to leave space behind those projects so we can mitigate flood risk for those living downstream. But where the data supports it, I think we need to be more open as an enterprise to opening up more storage opportunities behind those projects, particularly in times of drought that we're facing right now. And if the data supports some additional water supply behind that, and we can still meet our flood risk management objectives, we ought to be absolutely open to that. And again, 715 projects in impound water, that's a lot of water. And I think just opportunities that we can pursue. And I know Secretary Connor and I talk about this one often. He is absolutely open to this idea and things that we are already seeing out in the South Pacific Division and certainly Southwest Division, where we're trying these ideas out as we speak.
Sir, you mentioned storage as well, but reservoirs and such are also facing a sediment issue as well, loss of capacity and such. What efforts in R&D and the USACE doing to address those type of challenges as well?
Yeah, real sticky challenge getting sedimentation out behind an inland reservoir. So Zach Tyler was at the third quarter EGM and had a team there and talked about an emerging technology called water injection dredging. So think we put a large pump onto a small vessel in a reservoir, inject water down into the sediment on the bottom. And when the water is flowing out our gates, we can suspend some of that sediment and move it out the reservoir. So we're in the process now of working with partners on actually building this vessel and then doing all of the necessary planning and downstream environmental work so we can try to put this technology to use. But this is not just a challenge for us. It's a challenge for the Bureau of Reclamation. Congress has given us authority to pursue these types of initiatives for several years now, and I'm glad to see this one coming to fruition.
Sir, another a personal question here. In your time, in your career with the Army, where does your time in the U.S. Army Corps of if I could say that, in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers rank in your various postings?
Yeah, I tell people the one regret, I've had a great career. I'm at 37 years. I'll retire next September after 38 years of service. The one regret I have is I came to the Corps of Engineers very late. I've only been with the Corps for the past 7.5, almost 8 years now. And I tell young officers coming up, please don't do what I did and come to the Corps. I had been a one-star general for 2 years before the 54th Chief of Engineers, General Bostic, called me. I was at Fort Hood, Texas at the time. He said, Scott, I think it's finally time we bring you over. And as I mentioned earlier, he sent me up to Northwest Division and just began this absolutely fascinating journey to wrap up my career. I got to tell you, it is clearly the highlight of my Army career. I get to work with incredibly professional and talented civilians each and every day on some really hard challenges, and a lot of dedicated military officers and non-commissioned officers as well, working to complement the incredible technical efforts by our civilian workforce. Without a doubt, the highlight of my career, and I'm just proud to serve in my current role.
And you may have addressed this some earlier, but if not, take it again. But looking ahead at what do you consider some of USACE's biggest challenges and opportunities for success moving forward? Yeah,
and so I had been the Chief of Engineers for 60 days, Tim, and some of your listeners may have heard this story. That's okay, I'll repeat it. I'd been in the seat about 60 days, and I was up in the halls of the Pentagon, up on the E-ring, walking to my office, and the Secretary of the Army at the time, Secretary McCarthy, said, okay, Spellman, you've been at this for a couple months now. What do you see as your greatest challenge, and what do you see as your greatest opportunity? And I said, Mr. Secretary, as is often the case, it's one and the same. It's this massive and historic workload that we have in front of us, and it gets more historic each and every year. And I took him through where we had been historically over the past several decades, somewhere between a $15 and $20 billion annual construction program. And as everyone listening knows, that's above $90 billion today. So incredible challenge for us, but also comes with incredible opportunity for how we can do things better. And we've been talking a lot about innovation and research and development and how I see that can help us in delivering this massive program, but it's other tools as well. And I'm just very proud to report that the administration, from Secretary Connor all the way up to the White House, certainly in Congress and the 4 oversight committees that we work with, 2 in the House, 2 in the Senate, have been just dedicated in giving us the tools that we need to get this job done. And so in our USACE campaign plan, we have 4 lines of effort. We have 23 supporting objectives. And each of those 23 objectives, in my mind, are we're working to better enable our districts down on the pointy end of what we do, down on the construction site, get better at safely delivering quality projects on time and within budget.
Well, sir, before we go, I want to remind folks that to learn more about ERDC, you can enjoy our podcast, the Power of ERDC podcast, and our social media platforms. And sir, I cannot let you go. I know ERDC is fixing to celebrate its 25th anniversary. We've kind of packed a lot into 25 years. And so that's coming up pretty soon. But do you have any closing thoughts, closing words before we leave today?
Hey, Tim, I can't end without just saying thanks to our great ERDC teammates. I've worked over the past 2.5 years. I'm going to continue to press on this. I've been working to elevate research and development as a program. Just like we have a civil works program in the Corps and we have a military construction program in the Corps, we have an R&D program in the Corps that is world-class, and not only for the mission that we do in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, but world-class for the work that we do across the Army and across DOD and across internationally. And I just want to personally thank all of our great research scientists and all the supporting teammates down there in our multiple laboratories across the country for the heavy lifting that you do each and every day. You're making a difference. Guys like me have to do our job in getting you the resources you need so we can do more. So thanks to everyone.
Sir, thank you so much. And thank you for joining us today. And we will see you again in June.
Great. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, sir.